Sports Network. The NFL show, as always, is brought to you by the Lawnmower 3.0 and Manscaped. Make sure you use the promo code TGT20 to get free shipping and 20% off your first purchase. I am your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. How about you?
I don't know. I'm just disappointed. I came on late, so I didn't have any ball jokes ready for the testes to make your testes to besties. But I do want to once again bring up the Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0, 20% off with promo code TGT20 at manscaped.com. All right, Sam, my favorite thing to talk about is what coaches are going to get fired. And I think there's going to be a huge turnover by the time this season's over. And I think a lot of the guys that were on your list on the article you wrote are pretty much dead no matter what. But a lot of them are kind of questionable. If you win some games, maybe you could save your job. Let's start off with the most obvious. If we know who the most obvious is before you even put it up on screen, right?
It's Adam Gase, right?
It is Adam Gase, because Adam Gase, I don't know why Adam Gase got the job even to begin with. The New York Jets are a complete mess. You know, he wanted Le'Veon Bell. That didn't work out. He's ruining Sam Darnold. His job performance in Miami wouldn't make you think he should ever even get another head coaching job, I would think, Sam. Adam Gase, to me, is an outright failure. Plus, he's got really weird eyes.
Yeah, supposedly Peyton Manning just went to bat for Adam Gase during the offseason. That really helped out when the Jets made their decision to sign him as a head coach back in the summer going into 2019 or whatever it was. So now you got him on the Jets. They went 7-9 in 2019. I'd argue that's mostly because of the players that were already on the roster. They really had nothing to do with Adam Gase. They already had some talented pieces there, like Jamal Adams. And then those guys are gone now. Basically, all their talented pieces are gone, besides Quinn Williams, they just drafted, and maybe Marcus May, who also was recently drafted by them. And this is a terrible team. They're 0-8. And at this point, they might as well just keep Adam Gase around for the rest of the year so they can lose all the games and get Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, because they're going to lose the rest of the games. I don't see any games they're winning. I don't even know if they can come close. You look at their schedule, there's no game on there. Well, maybe they got a shot here because you would think the Patriots maybe. But even if the Patriots have a lot less talent, they've got Bill Belichick. And they just showed they went, toe-to-toe with the Buffalo Bills. The Jets did a little bit the week before. This is the NFL. Maybe they get lucky and win one game. But Trevor Lawrence is destined to be a New York Jet the way this is headed. And if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I'm really considering staying at Clemson for another year and staying safe.
Yeah, but even if you do that, what happens if the Jets come up number 1 overall in 2022? I mean, really, that's what could happen, though. Because if you don't give them a new quarterback, even if you change head coaches, you're staring down the barrel of being a Giant or a Jet again.
Well, and I think the big question is here, even if you get a new head coach, what head coach wants to go there? Even if they're a new guy, who wants to go there and risk being the coach of the Jets right now? Because Adam Gase was kind of successful in Miami. He did make the playoffs the one time. But New York seems to be maybe the worst-owned franchise in the NFL, and that's coming from a Cincinnati Bengals fan, so you know it's bad.
Yeah, you're not going to get any of the top coaching prospects to go to the Jets and be the head coach. There are plenty of other options here. You'll have Houston, where you have Deshaun Watson. You'll have Atlanta, where you have Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. There will be other destinations that are far more attractive than the New York Jets, which just seems to be the pit of mediocrity. I mean, there are plenty of other teams we talk about. If the Chargers need a new head coach, that's a better spot. I mean, I would argue even Dallas, if Dallas was to get a new head coach, that might be more attractive. Get Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper and all those other weapons offensively. So I think there are much better places right now than the New York Jets.
All right, let's move on to the Denver Broncos, who I'm not even going to bring up the fact that you thought they'd be a playoff team this year, but right now Vic Fangio's job has to be on the line. Do the Broncos have enough here? We saw Drew Lock play really well this last week. They beat the Chargers. What would it take for Vic Fangio to get another year in Denver?
An 8-8 season, I think. Honestly, he's probably going either way. I think he's going either way. But really, if you're looking at it, it's only his second year. If they went 8-8, somehow rebounded from this harsh start, you can say, well, they missed Drew Lock for a couple of weeks at the start of the year. They had some injuries to guys like Von Miller. You can maybe make excuses for him and get him to a third year. But at this point, the team doesn't seem to be responding to him very much. And they only won because the Chargers basically choked away the win this past weekend. So I don't see a situation where Vic Fangio comes back to Denver.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the schedule, they may not win another game. I'm sure they will slip a game or two in there. They are good defensively, but they finished up the last half of the season. They go to Atlanta, which I think is a tough game for anybody because you never know what Falcons team you're going to get. You go to Las Vegas to play the Raiders. You host Miami. You host the Saints. You go to Kansas City. You go to Carolina. You host the Bills. You go to the Chargers, and then you play the Raiders. I don't see a path here. I know we're on election night and everybody's looking at a path to win the election. I don't see a path here where the Denver Broncos can get anywhere near 8 wins.
No, I think maybe you max out maybe 3 more wins. You might get to 6 in the year, but that's probably the max for this team.
All right, let's move on. Let's go to the Chargers' Anthony Lynn, who seems to be a guy that has a hard time closing games out. I mean, they've lost, 3 17-point leads in a row. Anthony Lynn, is there any way he keeps his job here?
I'm going to say yes, which is kind of controversial because I like Anthony Lynn. I really do. I don't think he's a terrible coach, but you've said this before. Being able to close out games is a sign of a good head coach, and if you can't do that, you probably don't deserve a head coaching job. You've said it before on this program, and I generally agree. They do have Justin Herbert. Maybe give him one more year of Justin Herbert to see if it turns things around, if they get to 10 wins again. So they do have potential pieces here with Derwin James, who's been injured the entire year. You would just drafted Kenneth Murray, middle linebacker. You have Joey Bosa. You signed Keenan Allen to extension. There are pieces here to build a winning football team, but it just hasn't materialized so far.
Yeah, I think he could keep his job. I think what this would take would be maybe a 4-4 finish, which when you look at the record, I mean, the next 3 weeks to me are huge for him because he hosts the Raiders, he goes to Miami, he plays the Jets. You got to get 2 out of 3 there. And as you put in the article, the NFL's ruthless. And most guys don't get 3 opportunities in a row or 3 straight seasons where they are below expectations, Sam.
Yeah, now you are below expectations. Even if it was a rookie quarterback in Justin Herbert, you have all the pieces around you to winning football games right now, and you have those losses where you basically give up huge leads. You should be a winning football team right now, and you're not. And you can't, like I said, this is the second year in a row they're set to have a losing record. That doesn't bode well for Anthony Lynn.
All right, let's go to Jacksonville with Doug Marrone. I think early in the year, we had some hope for him. They start off, they won the game early against Indy. They lost a couple close games after that. I think they played Tennessee close. But the Jacksonville Jaguars, this is a team that has blown up their entire roster. You might as well blow up the entire coaching staff also.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised he even survived as long as he did in Jacksonville. I thought he would have been fired this past year, but they decided to keep him around. And it turns out he's probably going to have the worst season of his career coaching with Jacksonville. They had that one miracle season in 2017 where everything came together. They had arguably the best defense in the NFL that year. Blake Bortles had probably his best year as a pro, and Leonard Fournette was healthy. And they went to 10-6. They went to the AFC Championship game, lost to New England. Since then, they've won 12 games in the past 2.5 years. He's going to be fired. There's no doubt about it to me. Nothing he can do can save this team.
Yeah, there's a team that, I mean, they're probably a 2-14 to 4-12 team, and probably closer to 2-14 than anything else by the time this is done. Next up, a guy in his first year, Mike McCarthy, who has proven how good Aaron Rodgers was because Aaron Rodgers did get the Packers to a Super Bowl and win it with Mike McCarthy as the coach. I think the real Mike McCarthy we've seen without an Aaron Rodgers. And this is a mess in Dallas. You had Andy Dalton get hurt, cheap shot. Nobody defended him. Mike McCarthy, and I've said this before on the show, I said it when they hired him, I think he's soft as a human being. And soft as a human being doesn't usually win too many games as a leader of a professional football team.
And there were a lot of things I wrote about in this article. By far, Mike McCarthy had the largest section because I felt I had to justify putting a first-year head coach out there. But Jerry Jones gave Jason Garrett a lot of leash for what he did. I think he might be quicker to pull the trigger with Mike McCarthy because they are not a winning football team right now. And Jerry Jones desperately wants to win their Super Bowl. And there's already stuff coming out of that locker room. I mean, James Slater from the NFL said that players were calling the coaches totally unprepared. They don't teach. They don't have any sense on adjusting on the fly. They just aren't good at their jobs. And even Richard Sherman brought up a good idea on Chris Collinsworth's podcast where he said, if it's Tom Brady that gets hit the way Andy Dalton did, the player who hit him is not getting off the field. It's not going to happen if it's Russell Wilson or it's any one of these elite quarterbacks. They're not getting off the field. There's going to be a brawl, and there wasn't one when Andy Dalton took that shot. To me, it just says that the Cowboys, they've given up. The players have given up to the coaching staff, and right now, Mike McCarthy is just dead in the water.
Yeah, and he was a bad hire to begin with. I don't think there's any way that McCarthy saves his job here. because I don't think they're going to win the division. I think Philadelphia is better coached with a better quarterback right now. And who do the Cowboys go after next? Do you go after a guy like Bieniemy, or since it's Jerry Jones, does he just try to find another big name like a Bob Stoops?
Wasn't Marvin Lewis one of the guys that brought him to interview? I mean, honestly, I could see them going for Marvin Lewis. I know that's not the right direction to go after.
Though? I'm not a Marvin Lewis fan, but I think he's a solid football coach. I don't think he's a great head coach. He was obviously a great coordinator, but I'll tell you what, Marvin Lewis is a better coach than Mike McCarthy. And a lot of people out there, especially in Cincinnati, may pass out when they hear me say that. But, I mean, if Marvin Lewis goes there, the Cowboys are still going to fail. Put it like that. Maybe they just have 3 wins right now instead of 2. I think Mike McCarthy's done. And the sad thing is, Mike McCarthy will probably pop up again somewhere in the next 2 years.
Yeah, and we saw him take a year off last year from coaching football. And really, he's probably going to get another shot. But there's a lot of young guys right now. And we talk about even guys like Bieniemy who are deserving of getting a head coaching job. I would rather have him. I'd rather also have Bill O'Brien just as a head coach, certainly not as a GM. And even Dan Quinn. I'd rather have Dan Quinn as a head coach than Mike McCarthy at this point.
Well, I think Dan Quinn's a really good football coach. I think what happened is that Super Bowl just kind of took it out of him. That's hard to overcome something like that. And I think Dan Quinn's a good football coach. I think Dan Quinn will have one of the jobs we're talking about when the season ends. You know, when they have Black Monday and they fire the coaches, I think Dan Quinn will get a job. I think Anthony Lynn's a guy who, if he gets fired, would have a job right away. Adam Gase, no way. Vic Fangio will go back to being a defensive coordinator. Mike McCarthy will go sit on his boat and contemplate his life for another year and then try to trick somebody else into giving him a job. But it's not going to happen. I think Mike McCarthy probably just needs to do some manscaping and chill out.
I mean,
the great thing, if he wants to manscape, he can use the promo code TG20 to get 20% off and free shipping. Go ahead, Sam.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, there are a bunch of guys who get more coaching jobs and more opportunities if they get fired. You kind of lost my train of thought there when you were saying that. I kind of was following you a little bit there, but you know, it's. I was going to say Mike Zimmer was one we were talking about. We'll talk about him later, but I certainly think that guys like McCarthy won't have a job if they get fired this year. What about Bill O'Brien though? Because Bill O'Brien had the GM position and the head coaching position. Does he go back to being just a coordinator? Is that okay? Is that some kind of transition you can make from going from a GM to being just a coordinator again?
Well, if he wants to get paid, he's probably going to have to. Bill O'Brien, I think overall did a good job in Houston. He just was not equipped. Most guys aren't equipped to do both. How many guys have we seen be successful with that? There's not many. And I think Bill O'Brien's a guy who probably eventually will get a job again as a head coach. I wouldn't be surprised to see him I wouldn't be surprised to see him go back to college and coach because you can make money there. And he did an outstanding job at Penn State after the Joe Paterno fiasco to kind of get that program headed back in the right direction, which Kirk Franklin's kind of ran with since then. But I think there's a lot more options for a guy like Bill O'Brien just because he has been a successful college coach. I don't think that necessarily he stays in the NFL.
I mean, that would make sense. You can get a big offer from a college institution. I mean, college football is kind of crazy, really. They have these avid fan bases, and they're still willing to pay you millions of dollars to be a head coach. You're making a lot of money down there at that level. And you have more control and more power.
All right, next up, we're going to talk Matt Nagy. I think this is a guy that if he loses his job, will get another job immediately. I think he's actually done a really good job there. But the problem is he's got to take responsibility with Ryan Pace, as you put in the article, for drafting Mitchell Trubisky. And this is the thing. I'm not going to give him crap about taking Mitch Trubisky instead of Patrick Mahomes. Because if you remember back then, not a lot of people thought Patrick Mahomes probably was even a first-round pick in the NFL draft. My problem is he took Mitch Trubisky over to Deshaun Watson. If the Chicago Bears take Deshaun Watson, the Chicago Bears are infinitely a better team. Patrick Mahomes on the Chicago Bears team is just another guy because they don't have enough skill position players here, Sam.
Yeah, I know Patrick Mahomes is not projected to be a top 10 pick, so I can't blame him too much for that. It's just more like the hindsight that gets him for that area. But at the same time, picking Trubisky, who was a one-year starter at North Carolina, that high in the draft, I think they even traded up to get him. I believe they traded up a spot to get him.
They traded up one spot for no reason with the 49ers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was no reason for them to do that. They were safe all the way. And making that move it looks so stupid now in hindsight, and that's what's really going to cost them. I think Nagy could get another year. I think he probably deserves another year, honestly, because they still have that good defense right there. They just need the quarterback.
So you think he gets another year?
I would give him one more year.
How about this? Do they have to make the playoffs to get him another year?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they have to make the playoffs. He can't. If they collapse and miss the playoffs here, then he's done.
So I think there's a decent shot he's done. Because the Bears, when you look at their schedule, they go to Tennessee this week. The Titans are coming off a bad loss. Then they host the Vikings. The Vikings are a dangerous team for anybody to play because they do have offensive talent, especially Dalvin Cook. You got the Bears go to the Packers. They host the Lions. They host the Texans and Deshaun Watson. They go to the Vikings. They play the Jags. They play the Packers. I think the big thing here is there's probably 4 more losses there. What's their record right now? 5-2 or 5-3?
5-3.
Yeah, so I think you're looking at 9 or 10 wins. I think they squeak into the playoffs. I think Nagy will keep his job, and I think Nagy should keep his job. I think he's a good football coach. He made a bad pick on Mitchell Trubisky. He made a great trade on Khalil Mack, though. And, there's been some questions about some of the moves he's made, but other moves have turned out great. And let's face it, if we judged coaches just on how many big misses they had, Bill Belichick wouldn't be considered that great. Because Bill Belichick's missed on all kind of number 1 picks. He's missed on bringing free agents in. But he can coach them up, and they still turn out all right. The Chicago Bears are still a good football team. They're a really good quarterback away from being a quarterback and maybe a skill position player or 2 away from being a Super Bowl contender. So I think if you're Chicago, you keep Matt Nagy, and you just hope for, Sid Luckman Jr. to be born.
Yeah, really. You're hoping for one more guy coming there and just make a game changer for your franchise. I do think they need a little running back help as well. But running back, quarterback, those 2 are probably the top targets for them in this offseason.
Running backs are a dime a dozen, though. You throw in a couple big-time wide receiver, one big-time wide receiver, the running game will become better automatically. Because right now, I don't think there's any huge threat of getting beat deep, but a lot of that's because Nick Foles is the quarterback also, Sam.
Yeah. They have Allen Robinson, and Allen Robinson is probably a top 15 guy in the league right now. I wouldn't say top 10. He's certainly a good receiver.
The drop-off after him is significant.
Yeah.
So you need a guy in the slot that can cause some trouble so you can kind of keep the double teams off of him also. Another guy who I think is done no matter what is Matt Patricia. The Matt Patricia experiment is dead. I assume Detroit's just going to play this out and let him finish out the season. Let's face it, an interim coach isn't going to do any damn good right now anyways. I think the Detroit Lions have some talent. I think they have more talent than what they show right now, but the way they play and the way they're coached, I think Matt Patricia's done, and he'll go back to being a defensive coordinator somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely going to get a coordinator job, but he won't be a head coach again, I don't think, at any point in his career, unless he goes down 5 years from now, people forget what happened to Detroit and gets another job. But based on what's happened so far, the defense in Detroit has been horrendous throughout his entirety of his career there. And that defense, he's supposedly supposed to be this defensive guru who's going to come there, fix it up, and make Detroit a good defensive team. That hasn't happened yet so far. The only thing holding Detroit together has been Kenny Galladay at wide receiver and Matthew Stafford at quarterback.
All right, next up, my favorite, Zac Taylor. Zac Taylor's a guy who I think will be safe, Sam. I don't think he should because I don't even think he should have ever had the job. I think that the coaching for the Bengals is bad. I think if the coaching was a little bit better, the Cincinnati Bengals would probably have 4 or 5 wins right now, and people would be talking about being a playoff team.
Yeah, so do you feel that is it Joe Burrow that's giving him this extra year or giving him more time, or is it just the ownership deciding we're going to give him 3 years no matter what?
Well, I think it's Joe Burrow, and the combination of Joe Burrow and the fact that this offense is really good. If you look at the rest of the season, they go to Pittsburgh, but then they play Washington, the Giants, they play the Dolphins. You figure 2-2 there. They beat the Cowboys. They beat the Steelers, 3-3 there. So I'm saying you split with the Steelers, so don't freak out too bad. So you go to Houston, you beat the Texans. I think this is a team that can finish the season 4-4. 4-4 gets them to 6 wins. 6 wins is 3 times more than they had last year. Joe Burrow is probably going to throw for 4,500 or 5,000 yards. There's going to be hope. And then this is all just going to fall on what they do in the offseason because Lou Anarumo should not be a defensive coordinator in this league. Jim Turner should not be an offensive line coach in this league. The Bengals need a scouting department. Their scouting department has 8 guys in it. The other 3 teams in the AFC North altogether combined have a little over 100 scouts. So they all average like 33 scouts per team. So the Cincinnati Bengals and Mike Brown, this is another one of the worst ownerships in football. He does not step up the game because people say, well, he doesn't want to win. I think he wants to win. I don't think he knows how. And the way you win is with a scouting department that can go out and find a guy in the 5th or 6th round that can become a contributor, at least on special teams. And what we've seen with the Bengals is the Cedric Ogbuehi's, the Andre Smiths, the Jake Fishers. I mean, they've drafted so many bust offensive linemen, which is why the offensive line is a mess right now. And it's the only team I think that this last week against Tennessee had 5 completely different starters on the offensive line. And the continuity didn't hurt them at all. They were actually a hell of a lot better. So when you look at that, I just think that you need people in the scouting department that can find talent. I think that Zac Taylor needs, instead of hiring his buddies to be his assistant coaches, needs to go out and find actual coaches. So that's my take on him. I think Joe Burrow's going to save his ass this year. I think Joe Burrow may save him for 4 or 5 years. My problem with that is this. When you get down to it, can it be won with a coach that is inadequate? Number 2, Zac Taylor's offense looks pretty good right now. So by an inadequate coach, I'm not saying he is necessarily a bad football coach right now. I think he's a guy that might be a good offensive coordinator. But he needs to find a veteran defensive coordinator to come in here. He needs veterans on his staff. A guy like Mike Zimmer. There's all kind of guys out there you could bring in. Sean McVay did it with Wade Phillips, got to a Super Bowl almost right away. So I think there needs to be a little bit more experience on the staff. They need to get an offensive line coach in there that knows what the hell he's doing. The guy they got, Jim Turner's not it. So I think he keeps his job. And I think the big thing on how long he keeps it are the subtractions he makes and the additions he makes on the coaching staff, and then what the Bengals front office does about a piss-poor scouting staff.
Wade Phillips is out of a job currently. He's currently looking for work. So, if you want to call him, get a veteran guy on that defense right now because you do need defensive coordinator help. My biggest concern is you're not going to spend the money. And they spent the money in free agency this past year. And it really hasn't helped them so far, right? They've had issues. The offensive line was not fixed. The defense is still leaking at points. It's gotten a little better, but not significantly better. So my concern would be
almost everybody they sign's hurt. DJ Reader was the only really significant signing to me. Everybody else, Mackenzie Alexander's all right, but they had drafted. Here's the other thing: they drafted so many cornerbacks over the last 5 years that have failed.
William Jackson was one of them. I know that.
Dre Kirkpatrick, Darquez
Denard.
They've got them all over the place. And the thing is, the defense has to be fixed on this team. The offensive line, I think, really is fixed with a good coach. Mike Munchak was at the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had all kinds of guys like Villanueva who weren't big picks. But Mike Munchak turned them into an offensive line. He turned them into maybe the best offensive line in football a couple years ago. They brought in, after Munchak left, they brought in the guy who was his direct assistant for the previous 6 years. So you had continuity on the staff. And I think what you've seen is the talent level is not there for Pittsburgh, but the offensive line each week seems to get a little bit better. And I think that's all coaching. Perfect example, New England, and was it 2015 or 16? They made it to the championship game against the Broncos, and their offensive line was horrible. And that's why they lost that AFC championship game. The year before, after they won the Super Bowl, that Skrenecki was their offensive line coach. He retired. He took that year off. The O-line was really bad. So the next year, Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft offer him twice the money any other offensive line coach is making to come back. It since then 2 more Super Bowls. So I think the most underrated coach on any staff is the offensive line coach. I think the offensive line coach is more important than the offensive coordinator, because if you've got Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, A.J. Green, Joe Mixon, Gio Bernard, you got Joe Burrow throwing him the ball, it doesn't really matter what offense you call. They're going to figure it out. They're going to make plays. The question comes down to whether your offensive line can hold the defense off. And you see the same thing in Green Bay. What use is Aaron Rodgers if you can't block the Tampa Bay Buccaneers front 4 or the Minnesota Vikings front 4? So I think offensive line coach is a huge need for the Bengals. I think that's the biggest need for the Bengals. If they could bring in a guy like they had in the 80s, like a Jim McNally, or the old Colts guy, Howard Mudd. A great offensive line coach can make an offense almost instantaneously better, because what you get now is you get a lot of offensive linemen on every team that you see. When you watch them, they don't sit their butts. They lean over like this. They get bull rushed. They get ripped. They get destroyed. Hell, half the time when you watch a Bobby Hart or one of those guys for the Bengals play tackle, he'll lean forward. The other guy will just run around him without even touching him. And then Bobby Hart just stands up and looks back and see what happened. So I think a lot of this comes down to what they do in the offseason and how long he stays. I think Zac Taylor's safe as long as they don't end up only winning like 2 more games. I think that the key here is to get to 5 wins. I think he's probably safe. I think anything less than that, though, even though Paul Brown or Mike Brown has in the past had a tendency to let guys stay too long, I don't think with Joe Burrow sitting there that he can afford to let a coach kind of string him out forever. And there have been coaches in the past like Dick LeBeau and Bruce Coslet who he got rid of within a couple of years. So there is that history. Of course, there is the history of keeping Dave Schuler around for 5 years and Marvin Lewis around for 17 years. But I think Zac Taylor is safe as long as they get to 5 wins.
As a Bengals fan, do you want them to get to 5 wins then?
No, I have cheered against them every game this year because I want them to fire him and I want them to hire Mike Zimmer, who was on the hot seat in Minnesota. I think Mike Zimmer is a hell of a football coach. I think Mike Zimmer is a guy that if he was in Cincinnati next year, the Bengals are a 10 or 11 win team and they go to the playoffs even if they have the talent they have now, because I think he's the guy. He's proven he can win. In Minnesota, they've had a bad season this year, but if your Pittsburgh Steelers have got to play the Minnesota Vikings, even though you're undefeated, that game would worry you a little bit, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because they're a talented team. And Mike Zimmer, like I said, over the past maybe 5 to 6 years has been a top 10 coach in the NFL, I would argue. He's a good head coach. He should be a head coach moving forward. We saw this past weekend, they beat the Green Bay Packers. It just takes them getting healthy to be able to do that kind of thing. And when they're healthy, this is still a very talented team and probably one that will have every team on upset alert moving forward.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, if I'm Minnesota, I don't fire him no matter what the record is. It's hard to find a guy that's that good of a coach. If you look at this list of coaches up and down, by far the best, most accomplished coach is Mike Zimmer.
No, I agree. The best coach on this list is Mike Zimmer, which is why it's weird that they're in this kind of situation right now. It was just a rough start to the year, though, I think. I mean, things went wrong. You can't really control Kirk Cousins throwing, 10 interceptions in the first 4 or 5 weeks. You can't really control all that as a head coach. I don't put all the blame for this slow start on Mike Zimmer. Well, I just wonder, has he overstayed his welcome, per se, in Minnesota? Because they haven't won a Super Bowl yet. I think their window is kind of closing on them.
Well, the thing is this: Bud Grant didn't win a Super Bowl there for a long time. He's still in the Ring of Honor, and they still didn't win a Super Bowl. I don't think you can necessarily judge a coach just on if he won a Super Bowl or not. You know, a lot of things go into that, a front office and everything else. There's very few guys like a Bill Belichick or a Chuck Noll or a Tom Landry or a Paul Brown or a Vince Lombardi that are just going to walk in and automatically make your team a Super Bowl contender. Mike Zimmer is a guy who walks in and he gives your team toughness. Everything Adam Gase is what Mike Zimmer is. Mike Zimmer is a hard-nosed coach. He's going to hold you accountable, and he's going to expect you to do what you're supposed to do, or you will have to answer to him. Now, when you look at this list, Adam Gase is not like that. I don't think Doug Marrone's like that. Mike McCarthy definitely isn't like that. Matt Patricia's not like that. Zac Taylor's not like that. A guy like Mike Zimmer, there aren't many of those guys coaching in the NFL anymore. And actually, no matter what his record is right now, he is definitely one of the top 10 coaches in the NFL.
Yeah, so you want him and the Bengals a new head coach if that happens. That's what you want.
I think I don't care if Zac Taylor wins out and makes the playoffs. If Mike Zimmer's available, I fire his ass and I hire Mike Zimmer.
Yeah, I know you're going to say that because Mike Zimmer is a good head coach, and this is a guy who, I mean, if you put him in Cincinnati, you put him in one of these places where they have all the young pieces but aren't winning necessarily, even like you put him in Los Angeles, I would say, you have an automatically better team that's probably projected to win at least 9 games next year.
Yeah, I think Mike Zimmer is a guy, wherever he goes, you could expect to win 3 or 4 more games than what you did the year before. I mean, Mike Zimmer is more of a Forrest Gregg type. Forrest Gregg, when he went to the Bengals in 1980, the Bengals had been really good up through 77. 78, 79, they were terrible. They were 4-12. They had, you know, I think Homer Rice was the coach right at the end before him. And Homer Rice is a football coach. I mean, probably knew more than most of the guys in the NFL. The difference was he was a college football coach, and he did not have a persona about him. I mean, Mike Zimmer's a guy, when he walks in an NFL meeting room, automatically has everybody's respect because they know what he's done. You know, and the thing is, Vic Fangio, he has that a little bit, I think. Adam Gase, no. Anthony Lynn maybe has it a little bit. Mike McCarthy, he has it until you meet him. Doug Marrone, I don't think he's got it. Matt Nagy, he's getting there maybe. Matt Patricia doesn't. Zac Taylor doesn't. Mike Zimmer's a guy, out of the 9 or 10 coaches we just listed, he's a guy that walks into any NFL locker room. They tell all the guys he's the head coach, and they will immediately listen to him. Most of these guys on this list are not like that.
Yeah, that really separates him from these guys, like you mentioned, because he's a player, he's a coach who can go to a team and change the culture by himself automatically. A lot of these guys, like Zac Taylor, doesn't even know how to implement a culture right now. Like Mike McCarthy right now in Dallas doesn't know how to implement a culture, how to get the players on his side, and how to convince everyone we're going to win and make everyone believe that they're going to win. Zimmer can do that. A lot of these guys on this list cannot.
Well, see, most of these guys, I mean, aren't real old guys. They're kind of younger guys. And the thing is this, a lot of people talk about culture. Culture is everything when you coach football. And a lot of younger guys are guys that are first-time head coaches, especially in the NFL. You coach professional football. You walk in the meeting room, you know, all those guys there have been coached by Urban Meyer. They've been coached by Nick Saban. You know, they're not impressed with you. You have to be able to implement your own culture. And the problem with that is most guys will talk a great game. Every coach talks about, well, I want to instill my culture in my team. The problem is you can never deviate from that culture. And I think guys like Adam Gase, Mike McCarthy, they deviate from their culture. Matt Patricia was supposed to have a culture like New England, right? He didn't, because he deviated. He makes exceptions to rules. If you want to put a culture in a football program, whether it was high school, college, or professional, when you walk in on the first day, you tell everybody what's expected of them. Now, if you don't follow what you told them is expected of them, you will not have the culture you want. And once you've lost the ability to have the culture you wanted initially, you're done. That's why, like, you know, who was it, the guy from the Cardinals, Steve Wilkes or Jim Wilkes or whatever, that got fired after a year? Everybody's freaking out. Dude, I mean, this is the thing. If you go in your first year and you don't have your culture in place and it doesn't stay in place all year and I'm the owner, I'm going to fire your ass, because you can't get that back. Very few places will you lose a team and get it back. You know, what? I mean, I can think of a handful. Probably the one that sticks out the most would be the 1987 Bengals. They go 4-11-1. You had the strike season. The team hated Sam Weiss. You know, the players and the coaches were fighting all the time. Sam Weiss got the culture back in 1988. And he got the culture back because Paul Brown is the one that sat down and talked to him about that culture and about what he had to do, and he followed it. But if you want to have a culture in place, you can't deviate from it. You can't make exceptions, and your entire team should know what that culture is going to be. I bet this, if you go to Dallas and you ask 5 guys what the culture Mike McCarthy tried to instill was, you get 5 different answers.
Or no answer whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, then you get the same answer, though. So he's got a culture. The culture is no accountability. And we're not going to be very good. We're not going to be very hard-nosed. We're going to be soft. And I think what you got to have is you got to have accountability. And you can see with Mike McCarthy, no accountability in Dallas, because when your quarterback gets beheaded in Town Square and everybody stands around and looks at the guy that did it and doesn't do anything, there's no culture on that team, because your culture should be accountability and to have your teammates back. They don't do that in Dallas. That's why the Cowboys are a mess right now. The bad thing for Jerry Jones is, even if he loses out, the New York Jets will keep him from getting Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, there's no way to get Trevor Lawrence in Dallas right now.
No, because the Jets would have to win 2 games. That's never going to happen. All right, anything else or anybody we're missing here, Sam?
No, I think we covered just about everyone. We got through everything. I would just like to bring up with Matt Patricia. I mean, we saw the issues surrounding culture-wise. He alienated guys like Darius Slay, Damon Harris, and these veteran players who were proven guys who went in there and alienated them almost immediately. And we saw something with Bill O'Brien, DeAndre Hopkins. If you alienate a star player because you're taking shortcuts or whatever, you're going to get your own culture, And you see what happens. These guys get fired and teams fall apart around them.
All right, and I can tell you one thing about Matt Patricia. You know what that is, Sam?
What?
He could use Manscaped. So if anybody's out there and you're close to Matt Patricia, manscaped.com, promo code TGT20. Coach Patricia, I know he's going to be out of a job, may not be able to pay it, so he needs the 20% off. He needs the free shipping. And let's face it, he's got nothing else he's going to need to do once the season's over because he's going to be out of a job.
Yeah, might as well get your Manscaped and enjoy it a little bit during the off season. Get to work. But
do you enjoy manscaping, Sam?
It's not really a hobby, I would say. I haven't exactly gotten too much into it, so no.
All right, Sam. Anything else we want to discuss before we wrap it up?
No, I think we got everything for today, Mike.
All right. Make sure you go sign up for Rockfin. This show's exclusively there, so you're already signed up if you got it. But follow Sam Teets at SamTeets33. Follow me at Grilling Truth. Tomorrow we will have the NFL Power Rankings for the week, Sam.
Yep, we will.
All right, so make sure you check back at 1 o'clock live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitch, Periscope, something called D Live. I don't know what that is, but we're on it. I don't know if anybody knows we're on it. I didn't even know we were on it till today. But make sure you check that out. And for now, for Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening and watching to The Grueling Truth, where the legends